Hello and welcome to The Big Picture. A debate which has periodically taken place in this country is about the issue of holding simultaneous elections to the state legislative assemblies and the Lok Sabha. The latest to stoke this debate again is Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who, talking to his party members, is said to have made this suggestion a couple of days back. He went a step ahead from what others in the past, including his own senior colleague and former Deputy Prime Minister L.K.Advani, had been suggesting. While all of them had suggested simultaneous elections to assemblies and the Lok Sabha, Prime Minister Modi included even the urban and rural local bodies. Meanwhile, the reason behind this issue getting traction again is the report of the Standing Committee of Parliament, which in December last made this suggestion. It has made certain recommendations on how it can be done. However, political parties are divided on this move. We will discuss today the political, practical and constitutional issues relating to the enforcing a uniform election calendar in the country. To discuss this, I have with me K.T.S.Tulsi, Senior Advocate, Supreme Court and an MP in Rajya Sabha, who will be joining us very soon. P.D.T.Achary, former Secretary General Lok Sabha. K.N. Bhat, Senior Advocate, Supreme Court. Siddharth, Varadarajan, founding editor of the Wire.in. And on the phone line from Kathmandu is S.Y. Qureshi, former Chief Election Commissioner of India. Welcome to all of you. Mr. Qureshi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, Mr. Qureshi, this is not a new suggestion, as we all know. But what are your views on it? And when you were in the Election Commission, were these issues discussed at any point of time?
Well, the suggestion was made time and again, and as you rightly said, Mr. Advani had said it as early as 2010, and in various fora. But our view was that the reason for which this suggestion made are genuine. In the sense, the cost has gone very high and it has to be incurred 3 times in 5 years. Some dislocation of... can you hear me?
Yeah. Please continue, sir.
Yeah. And dislocation of the normal routine, because for 2.5 months when the elections are happening, it is true that the entire district administration gets busy. Ministers don't attend office. Some work that does come to a standstill, not entirely. Therefore, the reason for the provocation is justified. But I'm very much of this considered opinion that constitutionally, legally, it is not feasible. Because for the convenience of party workers' time, for the convenience of cost, or the little bit of a disruption in administration, people's right to their mandate cannot be compromised. So that is my view.
Okay, Mr. Bhat. Mr. Bhat, what are the legal and constitutional? Yes. We all know that up to 1971, actually until 1967, we have had first 4 general elections in this country was held simultaneously across the country. In 1971, because the elections were advanced by 1 year in Lok Sabha, we saw the disruption happening, and ever since we have seen the kind of disruptions which have happened. You think that it is possible now to revert to that kind of a system?
Girish, as you know, the Constitution says that the life of the Parliament shall be 5 years unless sooner dissolved.
Right.
Same is the provision relating to assemblies. And they get dissolved for some reason or the other. In 1971, Mrs. Gandhi wanted to dissolve the House and then go for election. And so was again in 2004. They wanted to dissolve the House and go. In between, the life of the Parliament was so short because of the critical numbers in the Parliament. So many of the parliaments could not go for full 5 years. As a result, the life of the Parliament was not 5 years, and the synchronization of Assembly and Parliament just got disrupted and went haywire, and it is impossible to bring it back. I agree with Mr. Qureshi that however much desirable it may be from many points of view, but I think it is almost impossible to achieve that. Because the problem is only legally sitting on a drawing board, you may say that it is possible, but in practice, reality, our just one example, Girish.
Yes.
See, in America, for example, there is no by-election for the president.
Right.
It is for 4 years. If you say 4 years, if the president somehow there is a vacancy in the office, there are methods which have been provided in the constitution as to how to fill it. But ours is a different type of democracy. We followed the Westminster model, and in this one, the life of the parliament and how the no confidence motion, etc., they are all of a different one. The governor's role, president's role, dissolving the state assemblies, so many things which we have seen several times. There are so many reasons for the casualty of the life of the assembly and of the parliament.
Okay, Mr. Achary. But you know the standing committee's report, which came in December, has certain very interesting suggestions. It says, you know, assemblies, or it's not talking of simultaneous election. It's talking of two phases of elections. It says there can be one phase in the mid-term of the Lok Sabha and another phase at the end of the term of the Lok Sabha.
I do not know what is the basis of this, these recommendations. Parliamentary committees sometimes make such suggestions which cannot be implemented. I think this also comes under that category. But so far as this issue is concerned, it has two aspects. If you look at it from the point of view of the candidates, in fact, many years ago, a member of parliament told me,
yes,
fresh from the elections, he told me that if only both the assembly and parliament elections were held together, it would have been very good for me, because much of my burden would have been reduced. So that would be shared by the other people. After all, there are 8 or 9 members of the assembly,
yes,
who will be there to share his burden.
Every candidate contesting for parliament election will want state assembly elections together.
Yeah. So from their point, so that is the point of view,
yes,
which they have. And then they also say that there will be a drastic reduction in the expenditure, the cost involved in the elections, all that kind of thing. But I look at it from the point of view of reality. You cannot hold parliament or synchronize parliament elections and assembly elections. It's not possible if you look at the reality, because assemblies may get dissolved in between, and you can't predict that. So situations arises which will lead to the dissolution of the assembly, and then within a certain period the elections will have to be held. You can't hold it over, and so that is the reality.
Okay. Siddharth, Prime Minister has a point. When he says, Prime Minister's point is that there's too much of time being spent, which of course it's not a new thing. People have been discussing this. But do you think that this country needs to think about this? How to, if it is possible, like what the standing committee suggests, at least have it only twice in a 5-year term?
Look, this complaint about too much time being spent is, I'm afraid, something which reflects impatience with the procedures of democracy, which I don't think is something which should be encouraged. The fact is that the reason why, one reason why your election procedure gets drawn out, and I've mentioned this to Mr. Qureshi in the past also, that the Election Commission takes an overly cautious approach and staggers elections over multi-phase
like it's happening now.
Even when, strictly speaking, law and order does not require you to do that. And that, I think, we can do without that kind of extended disruption. But the impulse, the underlying impulse for this quest for synchronized elections, or in its earlier avatar, the form this demand took, Mr. Advani himself articulated it, was why can't India have a presidential form of government? Mr. Advani has also said in the past that India needs a so-called two-party system. There is an attempt to graft onto a federal parliamentary system in India features of a unitary state, features of a presidential model, which are completely unsuited to the, not just the constitutional personality of India, but I dare say also the rhythms and structures of democracy as we have come to know it, and which have served us well. And I think that these are dangerous suggestions because they do away with the natural checks and balances that the founding fathers and mothers of this country, when they wrote the Constitution, devised, perhaps not so explicitly and not so directly, but by creating multiple layers of government that went to the polls not necessarily at the same time, they ensured that political trends, political power is diffused in some way, and that no one political trend.
Sorry to intervene.
Yeah.
But when you look at the Constituent Assembly, when the Constituent Assembly was discussing these things, I don't think they expected this kind of such disruptions to be taking place.
Which disruptions are we talking about?
Not disruptions in the sense that so many elections happening in.
Well, you see, I mean, as you have more states, you're going to have more elections, and if the constitutional scheme of things, as Mr. Bhat pointed out, envisages an assembly having a life of 5 years, but that life may be curtailed either for reasons of a government losing its majority or for other reasons. Sometimes the ruling party may itself decide to go for early elections. If your system allows that, it's clear that if you're going to have 27, 28 assemblies, you're going to have that many assembly elections. And there's no way that you can do away with it. And the checks and balance that I mentioned is that by creating the Rajya Sabha as the House of States, which would reflect the balance of power in those states at the time when elections are held, and of course staggered over a 6-year period, what the founding fathers and mothers ensured was that it would take many years for one political trend achieving temporary dominance to establish its control over all levers of power. And I think that's a good thing.
Okay, I think we now have Mr. Tulsi on the phone line actually. Mr. Tulsi, how do you look at this suggestion? Do you agree that? Do you agree with the suggestion made by the Prime Minister that these elections taking place almost throughout the year in some place or the other causes disruptions?
No, I don't agree with this at all. Electoral process is the process of getting democratic will of the people determined. And you see, the heart of the parliamentary system is that the government of the day is every minute responsible to the people, to the elected people in the Legislative Assembly or in the Parliament or in the lower house. So therefore, the moment they lose vote of confidence, they have to resign. That is the essence of democracy and its answerability to the people through the lower house, which is directly elected by the people. Now, Article 85 and Article 174, which deal with the term of Lok Sabha and the term of the Legislative Assemblies, it says that more than 6 months shall not intervene between the two sessions. That is to ensure that democracy is not derailed. Because the legitimacy of the political executive or the executive is derived from their majority in the House of People. And if they lose that election within 6 months, that must be reconstituted, and the election must be held.
Okay.
I want to ask 2 questions.
Yes.
Take scenario A, where one of the state governments loses confidence and the government falls within the first year. Does that mean that for 4 years there will be president's rule? And for 4 years there will be no election? And in that case,
Sir,
the center whose policies are not voted by the people for the purpose of state governance will replace the will of the people?
Mr.
That will
Tulsi.
be completely undemocratic.
Mr. Tulsi.
And second,
Okay,
yes.
okay, you finish your second point, sir. You finish your
Second
second
point is that what if Lok Sabha is dissolved itself? If Lok Sabha is dissolved, that means you will dissolve all the legislative assemblies. If Lok Sabha loses majority, if the government loses majority in Lok Sabha and recommends the dissolution of the House, what will happen? The assemblies will also be dissolved.
Mr. Tulsi.
And then election will take place after 5 years, which is originally designated. What will happen? Who will govern the states?
No, Mr.
Lok Sabha is dissolved, assemblies are dissolved, so it's the Council of States which will be the Parliament.
Mr. Tulsi, all the points which you're making are, absolutely valid as far as the present constitution is concerned. It's also interesting that the standing committee of the parliament, which came up with a report in December, talks of two rounds of elections, maybe during the midterm of the Lok Sabha and another at the end of the term of the Lok Sabha, so that if not simultaneously all the states and Lok Sabha, at least in two phases. Essentially, they're trying to say, what they're trying to say is, reduce the number of elections which happens so that there is better, opportunity available for people to rule, and all these disruptions which take place doesn't happen.
No. I was a member of the committee.
Yes.
And there is no such clear recommendation. We said that this is wrought with dangers, and it is not workable.
This is the
present constitution cannot be molded to that. The present constitution is based on parliamentary system of government. You have to overthrow this constitution lock, stock and barrel.
Okay.
Are we ready for that?
Okay. So you're saying that this constitution will not be able to do it, Mr. Qureshi. Is there obviously the present constitution as it stands will not allow many these things to happen. But do you think that there is a reason now to have a relook at the constitution?
I don't think so, because the issues are very serious. The reason given for this amendment is that there is a lot of cost and there is a lot of dislocation, and party workers' time is wasted. All three arguments will not stand judicial scrutiny. They're not good enough reason to deny the people their democratic right. I'll give you two, three things. Mr. Tulsi very rightly said. Mr. Vajpayee government fell in 13 days. Suppose along with that 30 assemblies also get dissolved. And after 13 days, the resolution, Mr. Vajpayee comes back. But all those 30 may not even come back. They will be topsy-turvy because some defection happened in parliament and the entire country, the democracy goes for a six. It's not possible. Conversely, like what is happening in Uttarakhand, for instance, some turncoat somewhere brings the thing down, and because of that, even panchayat should also be dissolved.
Yes, panchayat.
One cannot be subjugated to the vagaries of the other. Therefore, it's not possible. However, since cost is the provocation and the dislocation is the provocation, which are very genuine concerns, I have some solution to offer on those two counts.
Right.
Now, the reduction of time, Lok Sabha election, because we have been doing it in 5-6 phases, we take about 2.5 months. I have a formula. Of course, this is a question which is actually put to us. Why is it that we do it in 7 phases, that we must be stupid and inefficient? Which is not true, because we do it only for one reason, to save lives and so to conduct fair elections, which requires paramilitary forces. Paramilitary forces availability is limited. We negotiate with Home Ministry and the forces which they make us available. Then we see in how many phases we can deploy them suitably. We circulate them. Now, if the paramilitary force availability can be multiplied 6 times, instead of 700 companies, we get 3,500 companies. We can do election in 1 day, and that will save you 1 month, right, out of 2.5 months. Another 14 days we can cut down, because in a Supreme Court judgment, we have been allowed to declare election not more than 21 days before the notification, actual notification of the poll. Maximum 21 days. We can reduce it. We have been using even 7 days also in many cases. So we can forsake 2 weeks out of that. So 1.5 months out of 2.5 months can be cut down, and therefore half the time, which means dislocation, will be reduced to half. As regards the cost, the 30,000 crore was the estimate on the last general election by the political parties. Now, because there is no cap on the expenditure by political parties, candidates can spend 70 lakhs, political parties can spend 10, 20, 50 times more than that. There should be a cap on political parties. This has been a demand for a long time, which is the situation in most countries of the world.
Okay.
So let there be a cap.
Okay.
So the cost factor will also be taken care of.
Okay. Okay, that's interesting, Mr. Bhat. Mr. Bhat, do you think that is the only solution now? What Mr.
Yes.
Qureshi says, at the most, reduce the time taken, as Siddharth was also mentioning. There is no other. There is no way in which the constitution itself can be relooked at.
Law Commission, I must say, Mr. Qureshi and company has done an excellent job in suggesting a number of reforms in the election. But in any case, we are at the point now that whether these simultaneous elections are possible. I said, look, legally not possible. And however
No,
much
legally, sir,
desirability
legally
question
not
doesn't
possible
arise.
in the context
Because
of the present constitution. What about changing the constitution? What about amending the constitution?
My God, Girish, are we in a position to change the constitution now for this matter? Because is it at all possible? Even if it is possible, I don't think that we should do it. Because in a country like India, where synchronization is impossible, and that too in our system of government, unlike the unitary, the presidential form of government, this is not possible at all. Desirable, yes, because if nothing else, the TV debates and the election propaganda machinery, they can all be restricted to a few months once in 5 years. I agree, that is a good gain, but that is, Girish, we can't achieve that one. And it is not worthwhile amending the constitution for this purpose.
Okay, Mr. Achary. So, we have to live with it.
See, I fully agree with Mr. Bhat that the synchronization is not possible now. Of course, we used to have simultaneous elections to parliament and assemblies earlier in the 50s and 60s perhaps. But later on, things developed in such a way that it was not possible. Now, there are really practical problems which have been referred to by the other panelists, That is why it is not possible. And I don't think there is any need to revert to that simultaneous elections, which we had earlier. There is no need. Where is the need? I would say that today, the political parties are having to frequently go to the people. That gives them an opportunity to get in touch with the people. Otherwise,
once in 5 years.
Once in 5 years, they will forget about the people, and also they will forget the promises which they have made to the people earlier. So from that point of view also, it is good for ensuring the greater accountability of these political parties and the governments. I think it's better to have as many elections as possible and as frequently as possible.
Siddharth, when Prime Minister takes up this issue, I'm sure he has something in his mind. He of course, he has mentioned why he's saying it. He's talking about workers, social workers, more time they're getting. But he must be having something in his mind. Like we have been discussing these things. And as everybody on the panel agrees that there is we can understand the need for curtailing these things because there are several problems, not just the cost, the kind of time which is taken, everybody involved in even the political parties, the kind of cost which political parties have to incur on a So don't you think that there needs to be some amount of discussion, debate, maybe try to find some solution to this?
It's amply clear from the discussion that the practical difficulties themselves are such that this is a non-starter. This proposal is a complete non-starter. It cannot happen under the present constitutional scheme of things, and it doesn't make sense to want to amend the constitution to create a new system, which we are not. The Indian system is different from that of the United States or other unitary kind of systems, right? So I think that the impracticality itself means that this chapter should be closed. What interests me is the political thinking behind it and the political logic. And as I said, it doesn't surprise me that
no, and especially he's the first one who is saying that include the local bodies also,
yes,
rural, local bodies, everything, all four come together and have elections together.
Yeah.
Politically also, it is kind of tricky situation.
It makes no. It's tricky. It makes no sense, and I would say it's problematic for the simple reason that every election has its own dynamic.
Right.
It has its own issues. At a time, and I'm not sure many of us will look back upon that period with great fondness, but you had a single party dominating national politics and state politics.
Yes.
You could say...
Even panchayat politics.
Yes, exactly, yes. Right? Panchayat and municipal politics. You could say, okay, fine, what's the harm in having all these elections held at the same time if the same party is going to win all of them anyway, right? But we are today in a situation where politics has become atomized.
Completely.
And it's not necessarily a bad thing. So people have a certain idea of what they want from the national government, and in 2014, they gave the Bharatiya Janata Party an unprecedented majority that we hadn't seen for 20-25 years. But decisions they take at the state level are driven by state level considerations. So I think it doesn't make sense to clutter the voters' mind space with simultaneously having to choose panchayat, municipal, state level, and national level, representatives. And my feeling is that this impulse essentially comes from a desire to, it comes from a certain impatience with the imperfections that democracy produces. And these imperfections are there before us, right? The Bharatiya Janata Party has a Lok Sabha majority. It does not have a Rajya Sabha majority. It controls a fairly large number of states, but many important states are not under its influence or control. Maybe in the thinking of the Prime Minister or Mr. Advani when he advanced this idea in the past, synchronized or simultaneous elections gives the dominant national party a certain edge. Maybe this is the thinking. But I don't think it helps democracy. I don't think it helps the voter.
Whether that thinking will be validated on the ground itself is something which cannot be. Mr. Tulsi, very quickly, sir, last words to you. You think that any of these can happen without the basic structure of the constitution itself getting amended, and which cannot be amended?
No, I think this amounts to shaking the very roots of the constitution, and which is just not going to be possible. This is not only basic structure, but even just the very foundation of the constitution, the parliamentary system, the democracy. It is destabilizing the entire polity. India is a shining example in the Southeast Asia, where we are the only example of a successful working democracy.
Right.
It has taken roots. We should be proud of it, and we should strengthen it and not weaken it or shake it by the roots.
Okay, sir. I think on that note, we will end, but I'm sure if the government wants more debate and more discussions on this, there will be. But as far as all my panelists are concerned, they feel that it is not right or it is not feasible to have this kind of a changes in the system. We'll wait and watch what will happen. Thanks to all my guests. Please keep watching. We'll come back with another issue, The Big Picture, same time on Monday. Meanwhile, have a great weekend.